Hi, thanks for joining us for this training webinar coordinated by the Florida Water Resources Monitoring Council. I'm Dan Doherty with the Balmoral Group, assisting as chairperson for the Water Council. Please let me know if you have any questions on the Water Council or if you have suggestions on future water-related training opportunities. This training on the Watershed Information Network, or WIN, was put together by Tommy Adams with DEP, and I'll turn it over to him.
All right, well, thank you. And hi, everybody. My name is Tommy Adams. I am with I am a WIN coordinator with the Watershed Services Program here at FDEP. And the demonstration and presentation we're going to give today is really going to go over some of the advantages of WIN versus the old database that we had, which is Storette. Which is going to be the first couple of slides, and then I'm going to go into an actual demonstration of the WIN system itself, which is going to get pretty in-depth, give you some examples of our configurations, the way that data is uploaded, the way that we do error checks within the database itself, and then showing you extraction methods, things like that. So if at any point anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me while it's fresh in everyone's mind, and I'll go ahead and get started. So first off, WIN is short for the Watershed Information Network. It provides us with a modernized, centralized environmental data management platform and is the successor to Florida Storette. It provides front-end quality assurance, data input, storage, and reporting of surface and groundwater. I've listed the location of the system itself. It is a public database. You can go in there without registrations and be able to pull data from the database itself. But if you register, which we always recommend people to do, just give us some information, including your email address, and without even being a provider or anything like that, you're able to extract data with much more advanced features than you would get as just a person going to the website and not logging in. So it provides a platform for our data providers to submit data and perform data quality checks interactively prior to allowing data to be migrated into the published WIN environment, all without the need for any type of additional database software installation. Some of the biggest advantages are that the previous version of the database, which was Storette, the iteration, required a installation of software. You had to have an Oracle database behind the scenes, and none of that is required for WIN. All you need to do is have a compatible browser like Chrome or, for the moment, IE, and you're able to access all the features that WIN can provide, including uploading data. So we use WIN to store and manage data and to report the data to interested users and the US EPA, and we provide data to EPA on behalf of our customers, of our organizations. And folks, if you've got your mic live, you just want to go ahead and mute it, because everybody can hear it. End users, I already talked about the registration with the email. So through both the WIN and Florida Storette databases, our section, which is the Watershed Services Program, uses WIN to implement Florida statutory requirements, DEP rule requirements, and US EPA funding requirements for management of environmental data for the site. The use of the water quality data we use it for the TMDLs, the BMAPs. It's used by our IWR rule team, which is WAS. And we have 66 organizations currently actively providing activity and result data. And this is just a list of all the types of data providers that we currently support. Counties, cities, private entities, volunteer programs, obviously state entities, and water management districts. One of the focuses for WIN versus Storette is we've really tried to focus on the quality of the data before it even gets to the database. So we have features like visual verification for monitoring location. We have almost 200 quality checks that every piece of data must go through before it's moved into our migrated tables. Users are able to correct issues interactively in the system, along with being able to re-import data if it's faulty or they need to make corrections. And it has to pass minimum data quality standards before the migration takes place. We also have an anomaly feature that allows some of the other programs within DEER to review data. If they find anything that might be questionable or needs review, they can alert the providers, and then the provider is able to fix that issue or work with their WIN coordinator so that we can help them fix it. If you'd like to see a full list of our minimum data quality standards, it can be found right here at this address. And this will be on our FDP site, all these addresses I have, and contacts for the coordinators as well. We also have a very robust advanced view and extraction system. We call it Waves, and that's how users are able to go in, pick certain data points that they want to get data from, whether it be a WIBID, an organization, a specific monitoring location, or anything in between, extract that data, and then if it's something that they do on a regular basis, if they want to pull the same report but maybe change a couple of the parameters, they're able to save that extraction as what we call a save waves, and then rerun it every time they go in the system as long as they pick that same waves. Users do have to be registered in order to use that feature. Most extractions are going to be done using what we call an extraction versus what's called an on-screen report. So an on-screen report provides you with just I would call it a less advanced view of the data that you're looking at. You can't customize the fields, and it's limited on the amount of data that can be extracted at one time. If you need to use a larger extraction, you can put it into a text document, or it's extracted as a text document that you can load into Excel, for example, and you get a lot more options on the columns you'd like to pick and whatnot. We also have public reports that allow users to search for data using interactive maps, see where data are being collected and who's providing them. At this point, I'm just going to run through some features. I'm going to do a live WIN demonstration and just go over some of the features that I've brought up. So the first thing I like to show everyone is if you ever, for some reason, lose the address for WIN, all you need to put in, it's easily searchable by putting FDEP WIN into a search engine, and it should be the very first thing that pops up. Okay. So once users have registered and signed into WIN, this is the welcome screen. There's a couple real important features on the screen for organizations. This is the Anomaly List button. What happens is when our assessment team or anyone within FDEP spots data they'd like to be reviewed, you will see a number appear next to this anomaly list. They can click on this button, and then that will bring them to our Anomaly List screen, which I'll go over a little bit later, and see the data that needs to be reviewed and be able to go right to it and make those changes and update the team on if they've completed it or if they have any questions about the data itself. Okay. So the first thing a user would need to do, I'm not sure how many folks we have that aren't registered with WIN, but anyone that wants to register an organization with WIN or register themselves within an existing organization uses this Manage Account button. Goes to initialization. If they're a organization that needs to be added to WIN, that's when you'd use the Request New Organization and DPA button. If they're looking to become part of an existing organization, to load data, monitoring locations, things like that, they would use this request org role and then go through the steps of which are explained on the next pages that you go through on how to make those requests, pick an org name, or choose a role. I would recommend that before making a request to become a new organization, or if you have no familiarity with WIN, to contact one of the WIN coordinators and have them help you with these steps instead of trying to figure out by themselves. It can take about 5 minutes or so to go through the entire process. So once a user has created a role in WIN and they have an existing organization, when they are ready to load data, they need to have the data fit into the requirements for WIN based on the columns that are needed for that type of data set. So WIN is designed to make users do as little work as possible with their data and hopefully configure it WIN can be configured in a way that it fits the user's data instead of making the data fit WIN. So to do that, we use what's called configurations. And I've got one pulled up, I'm sure. So for example, this is the activity and result configuration for our test organization. And this is the name that I've given it. It'll have a number so that it's easier to find. And you can include just as much information or as little information as you want within the name. And all that's done just by pressing this add button. You would pick the organization ID that you'd want to create the configuration for, pick a name, the type. There are 4 types of configurations. This is where you would type in at least some type of description on what it is. And then the delimiter, most of the time we recommend folks use the pipe delimiter. There's also a tilde if you choose to use that. All right, we'll just get back to mine real quick. Sorry, I'm going to get back to that one so that everybody can see it. It's probably not the right one. Okay, so once you've picked your configuration, you've created it, you can go in there and this is where you would configure, you would select the order of the columns based on the way that the data is extracted from either a LIMS system or the way that it appears in, let's say, an electronic data deliverable, an Excel file, for example. And the columns can be moved simply by selecting the column. Maybe you want to move project ID from the position number 2 to position 1. You would simply highlight it, press the move up button, and that would move it from position 2 to position 1. You could, if it's not a required field, use the skip generate radio buttons like that. If it's got a star, it's a required field. So even though the configuration will let you skip it, once you try to save it, it'll provide an error. You can adjust the formats for your date times. Let's say that you're from France and you really like year, month, day, then you can choose that right here. Now, any of these, any type of column that has a date or time type, you will need to configure to make sure that you're choosing the date time format based on the way it's extracted. It's the same with monitoring locations and degrees, decimal, things like that. There's also a translate button. So if you spit out milligrams per liter with a small l, a lowercase l, then, and you don't want to change your procedure for that, you can go and choose in the translate, and you can say every time that the system sees milligrams per liter with a lowercase l, I want it to capitalize that L. And you would just choose the you choose to create a new translation and then select that value based on the previous value that comes out of your data set.
Is that a numeric? Like, can you change from milligrams to liter to micrograms per liter?
It will do any translation that you want, but in a standard value, translations only go to the existing standard value. So you can't make up something in a standard value list. Not everything is translatable.
Right.
For example, project IDs, things like that.
But no, that it won't automatically change.
Numerically change.
No, the result. There's no connection there.
Right.
You have to do that yourself.
Another feature is if you choose to skip generate, for example, every one of your depth measurements is done in meters, but you don't include that unit of measure. You can actually set it so that your activity depth, for example, this column here, you do skip generate, and every time you would have it generate meters. And so you wouldn't need to include that column in your data set, and Win would automatically apply that value to the column or to the theoretical column. It's important to note that the more translations and the more generations that you ask Win to do, the longer the validations will take, because Win's doing a lot of that work behind the scenes. So just understand, if you've got 200 translations, you're probably it's going to take longer for Win to read and validate your file than if you didn't have any or you had half that many. Nothing is saved until you hit save, so that's important to remember. If you've made some changes and you realized you made a mistake and you can't even remember where, don't be afraid to hit cancel. It'll still bring you back to that configuration, and then you can just exit out. Any questions about configurations? Okay. So before I get into activities, I also wanted to give you folks a demonstration of our visual verification that we have for monitoring locations. So I should have one at the top here, right here. So once you've imported data into Win, and this is a surface water station that I imported just for our demonstration purposes, it goes through validation checks. And once Win says there's no errors, you're going to see a visual verification. Now, this is for surface water and groundwater monitoring locations. So you can see I can't move anything. It doesn't say anything's ready to migrate. So I would just click on this surface water. It would show me the 2 monitoring locations I need to visually verify. You just click the hyperlink for each one. You have a nice map right here that shows you the exact location of that monitoring location. And if you look to the left side, you'll see the details of it. It's a surface water, river stream. We've got our lat longs. If it's put in anything but decimal degrees, let's say degrees, minutes, seconds, you're going to see the system will convert that to a DEP latitude, longitude. And then for certain monitoring location types, this reach code ID identifies the closest reach to the monitoring location, highlights it in pink, which you'll see it do in just a second. All right, and you can make sure that that's actually the part of the stream, for example, that the monitoring location is pulling data from. Sorry, this is a small screen for me. There we go. If for some reason you did not like that location, you know it's actually, let's say, 20 meters to the, it's probably more like 20 feet north, and it's closer to the stream, you can actually click on that screen. It will update the location in DEP latitude and longitude. It will not update the original values that you've input. And then you can make sure that's where it's supposed to be. It will also give us an indicator to say that the monitoring location was moved. And it does that just to make sure that users are kept in the loop of when monitoring locations change over time, or that maybe their previous data before they moved it to Win was not up to date, and they can see where it went to where it is. So once users are confident about where that monitoring location is, you would just go down to verify, which I'll need to scroll. There you go. You would click verify, and then it would ask you if you want to move to the next monitoring location and map it, or if you want to exit. It's also important to know you are not stuck on this small map. You can actually navigate in it. You can roll out, kind of see any other landmarks that might be around it if you're not sure exactly if you're in exactly the right place. Okay. So any questions about visual verification? All right, we're going to get rid of that tab. So everyone's probably seen me so far kind of navigating this list. What I'm going to do is kind of give you an idea of how data is uploaded and then moves into our staging area, which is what this list is. This list is enormous because of my role in WIN. Most folks will see a much smaller one because you'll only be able to see the data that you've imported. So don't be too overwhelmed when you see that I've got 500 data sets waiting. So when you have prepared your data set, which needs to be in a text format and with the delimiter that you've chosen based on your configuration, either pipe or tilde, you can either go to manage data, stage data, upload data. If you do that, you would choose your organization. You'll only see the ones that you've registered for. The type of upload that you'd like to do, activity and results, for example. You need to choose the name of your configuration, and most folks will only have one. And choose the file, which for me is version 2 probably. There we go. Now, I know for a fact that this document has a header, has a leading header, so I need to make sure that I check mark that. Do not worry about this generate translations. Most folks will not need to worry until you actually uploaded a file. The files on FDEP server will not be important, but I do need to show you that if you upload a document and you remove it and decide that you need it and correct it and want to re-upload it, it will need to have a different name because we save the files that you've imported on our server so that you can re-import that original file faster. You won't have to go find it. But if you've made adjustments to that document, that is not stored on the server, and you would need to make sure, if you'll notice this is the same name document, but I've had to change it because I uploaded it earlier today, and I just put a version 2 at the end. Okay, so once you're confident you've got what you want, you hit submit, view, and file status. When at this point is just making sure that the amount of columns in the document match up with the columns in your configuration. It is going through error checks, but you're not going to be interacting with it just yet. So you'll notice once you've gotten to the point where data is starting to get validated with our error system, you're going to get a status. And I'm not going to make everybody sit here and watch that. So this is the same document, but validated. And you can see I had 174 rows. Out of that 174, they were perfect because I've done this 1,000 times. And you can see once all the validation checks have gone through correctly, that you're going to get an option that says migrate records. It's important to note that until you hit migrate records, nothing is saved in WIN. So if there's mistakes at this point, or there's some reviews you'd like to do, or something terrible's happened, you just can delete the data set. If you delete it, it's gone from staging, and it's not going to affect any data that currently exists in WIN. So the only time data is affected is after migrate records is hit and you choose OK on the next screen. Once clean records are in, you can see them if you hit edit stage data. This is also an area that you would be able to make adjustments to the data. So even though it's past data checks, let's say that you realize that sample test 1 here actually had the wrong monitoring location ID, say it was actually 21202, you would just select those. You would go from the screen mode from filter to edit, and then choose the column that you want to correct. Now, I would say that make sure that you've selected what you want to update, because if you haven't, if you leave the selection empty, it will apply this value to all the records that on that page. So make sure that you have clicked which ones you want to make those corrections to, and then you would save that correction. Tells you how many. And you'll see it reflected immediately in this data set once it's done loading. So now you can see I've got my sample test 1 activity is now in monitoring location 21202. If changes like that are made to the data set, WIN will make you re-verify those records. And the way that it does that is through this check advanced errors. So if I don't click that and I go back to my stage data status, you're going to notice that half my records, because half of the results were in activity sample test 1, now need to be re-verified by WIN. You can continue to migrate records that have not been changed. So those remain clean, and WIN will let you migrate them even though you have half of these records from your original data set not ready yet. So it's a great way if you want to save some of the work you've done that day, but you still have some data that you want to re-verify or that needs to be checked, you can go ahead and finish that data that's ready and then keep working on this data set until you're ready to migrate those as well. Even if you migrate these records and you don't like these, you don't want them to stay in WIN, once you hit migrate and these are saved, you can delete the data set and these 86 are still in WIN. It's just that the 88 will not be. Okay. Well, I don't want everyone to wait for a validation error, so I do want to show everyone some examples of the checks that WIN runs. And by checks, I mean I'm just going to show you a data set that has an enormous amount of errors, just to give you an idea of how many error checks the data set goes through. And I believe it's this one. You can see in this data set, we had 143 rows imported. Out of those rows, 135 had errors. 8 were clean, which is why it's got this migrate errors button. And then you can see exactly what each error was. Now this file exists because we are constantly making sure that our errors are running properly. And this was one of my coworkers checking each one of these error conditions. So daytime is missing, wrong activity depth. So you can just get an idea of just how many error checks the system goes through to make sure the data is the best quality that it can be. If for some reason you don't want this data set to exist, or you want to have a record of the data that contain errors, you can choose the extract and delete errors. And what that will do is extract them from this data set. It will not extract them from WIN, just from this data set, and give it to you as a record, as a text document that you can interact with, and then delete them from this data set. So these 8 will remain, and the 135 will be removed from the data set, and you can just migrate this entire document at that point. Okay. You will not see this reset purge date button. That's a feature so that if you need us to keep a document in staging beyond its normal lifespan, which is about 45 days, you would just need to let us know. Say I need it to stay in the staging temporary tables for another 45 days. We'll do it. That's just a feature I can do from this screen. Okay. So any questions on error checks, activity, configurations for activities, anything that I've gone over so far?
Hey, Tommy, this is Dan.
Hey, Dave.
I had a question about the errors.
Yeah.
What do you do if like there's an error you can't fix? Like maybe you have a data set that doesn't have the time, or that doesn't have the, I don't know, some height of shut-off elevation valve or something. Is there a way to override those, or
there is not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When has those minimum data quality standards, and each one of those rows, if it's required by Win, it's because it's at least a minimum data quality standard. Now, there are some rows that if they're conditional and you have, so let's use top of casing as an example. If you have a well that you've recorded the top of the casings, that you have that value, but you don't actually have the measurement for the top of the casing, then you're going to get an error in Win that you can't resolve. But the top of the casing measurement is not a requirement. It's a conditional column in Win. So all you need to do is just remove that first condition, and then it won't be looking for the measurement for the top of the casing or whatever. So just make sure that it's actually a required field that you're having to fill in that may be erroring out before you abandon the data completely.
Okay. Okay, great.
And data can be, here's the bottom of meter box elevation value. So one other thing I forgot to go over is these errors can be corrected in Win just by clicking the error. You usually don't want to use all errors, because especially if you have as many as you just saw right there. But you're going to get a brief description of what the issue is. So the activity bottom depth has to be greater than the top depth. And you can click that. Sometimes there's more information if it's a complicated rule. A lot of the times that's all you're going to see. And then you would go and try and find the, let's see if I can, I'm missing, yeah, there we go. Sorry, try to find the column where you've got errors. So we know this is activity top and bottom. So we're going to go find our activity depths. So my top depth is 2.5, but my bottom depth is 1. So those are probably meant to be reversed. So in Win, you can always obviously fix that in the data set, re-import it, but this is a pretty simple fix. So you would just change this screen mode. So filter just means that if I had 30 values, I could filter on, for example, the top depth value, maybe an activity ID. Once you've got the record that you want, you change this screen mode to edit, find the value you'd like to edit, just put it in the column below the column in the entry area, and then make sure that you've chosen the record you want to update if there's more than one, and then go down and you would save selected. I'm not going to fix this because I want my coworker to be able to have his data, but once you do that, it'll change this to 1. You probably need to change this as well to 2.5, for example, and then you need to run an advanced error check, and it does check all the data again. So those validations can take a little bit of time. It's usually a good idea if you have multiple changes you need to make to do as many as you can at once, and then allow the validation to run through all that data. Just make sure you're able to keep track of everything. Okay. There we go. There's also, so that was at the activity level. Obviously, I could look at the results. You don't have to make a change on just that error. So if you know that some errors are going to cascade, for example, I've got a result value and a value qualifier that are both wrong, but it's only bringing up the result error at the moment. You can change both of them even though Win hasn't said they're both wrong. Because you know as soon as you change that result value, that value qualifier is going to need to be changed as well. So once folks get a little bit more used to the system, it's a lot easier to start making big changes all at once instead of having to just go through each one. And I've also noticed that the more folks use the database, the better their own processes get, because Win is kind of constantly giving them that feedback that, hey, this is wrong, maybe you need to change this, and then that just goes right back into their data sets. So that instantaneous feedback is probably one of the nicest features in WIN to help you get your data in the format that it needs to be in. Okay, so we're not going to make any of those changes permanent. Just to give you an idea, well, I'm going to do an extraction from WIN using the wave system and also show you some of the reports. And that's going to also lead me into how a data set typically looks before it goes into WIN and how you can put it in Excel from WIN and be able to interact with it. Because it does not come out in an Excel document. It's in text, and there's some changes you need to make. So we have lots of reports. Most folks, the basic public reports are what you would get if you decided not to sign into WIN. It's kind of not informative in a really detailed way. So who's providing data would give you the organizations, for example, that are collecting data within an area. Where it's being collected would give you some monitoring locations, watershed stuff. Really, when you want to move into the advanced reports that you get by signing in, and that's when you're going to start being able to use the wave system. I'm going to show you folks how to search for data using a map. So this kind of looks like, when we get down to it, the map that visual verification uses as well. It's not quite as detailed because it doesn't need to be initially. But on this map, I'm zoomed out enough that you're not going to see any features in the state. So what you want to do is kind of break that down. So let's say I know the water body that I want to look at is 1006, which is Wakulla. So once you make that choice, you need to give the system just a little bit of time to catch up. Because what it's doing is it's grabbing all the monitoring locations based on that selection. So, for example, if you chose Pinellas County, it may take a little while for all those monitoring locations to be selected. So it may look like it's not doing anything, but I promise you it is. So once you have the map pulled up, you can see I've got all the monitoring locations based on that WIBID. And then you can see here are the actual monitoring locations here. So you can see their name and some details. So for example, if I was to select just 54422, if I scroll down, I can either show information about the organization, which would be groundwater. I could see information about the monitoring location, which we get quite a bit of it right on screen here. And if I wanted to see all the monitoring location, all the results from that monitoring location, I would choose Show Sample Details. Now with this screen, you be aware that if it is a highly monitored monitoring location, or you choose a lot of monitoring locations from, let's say, Lake Okeechobee, you may get more results than you can comfortably extract using that screen. So if you ever get errors that say, you've had too many results, or this result has to be extracted in this way, just know that it's probably a better idea to go to our wave system, which I'll show you in just a moment, and start narrowing down your results if you're looking for something more precise. So we've got a on-screen report. So when you move to this report screen, this is, if you choose this radio, which is chosen by default, you cannot change any of the columns that are going to be shown on this on-screen report. Okay, these are static, these are our defaults. Also, the on-screen report, typically it's not interactive, at least not in a way where you can start to filter and do things like that. So unless you're looking at a very small subset of data, on-screen reporting is going to be a little bit too limiting for most folks, but it's there just in case anyone needs it. The limit is 500 records. And once you've exceeded 500 records, the system will make you use the extraction feature. It's 5,000, excuse me, not 500. So the extraction feature, and this is going to work the same way in waves, but I'm still going to go over waves. But once you choose extraction, you're going to start being able to choose which columns you'd like. So you want to get more information about the monitoring location. Maybe the HUC12 name isn't important. You don't need audit sensor details, but you want to know the analysis method. So all these are customizable. You can remove and add them at your pleasure. And then you just choose the Extract Report button. So a couple things about Extract Report. You will need to turn off your pop-up blocker in whatever browser you're using. And this does open in Chrome, this will open a second tab, and it will download this file to your My Documents. So for some folks, they will need to work with their IT to make sure that that is something that they have permission to do. IE works a little bit different. Internet Explorer will open up a tab, but it will display the results on the window in the same format, and you would need to grab all of those results. I usually just use Control-A and then paste them into a Notepad document. So here's the results from that monitoring location. A lot of folks are going to see this as gibberish, which is fine. But when we put this into Excel, obviously it's going to be much more useful. Okay. So now on to Waves, which is really the premier way to extract data from the system. It's got all these customizable features in it, and it's really going to help you get what you need from it, as opposed to just something from one monitoring location. So I'm going to show you a better version. So I've already selected a lot of these options, but what happens is when you go into Waves, you're able to use each one of these little pips, and they're usually closed, but you expand each one depending on the detail that you need on the data that's extracted, and then you make the selections based on your needs. So first example, you choose the monitoring location, or I'm sorry, the organization that you're interested in getting data from. Be sure to make this add button work. If you don't hit add, you will not get results based on your selection. You can get more detailed if you want. The org type, if you didn't want to, for example, look at just one organization, you wanted to look at all FDEP assigned organizations, you can choose that. If you wanted to highlight on one specific project within that organization, once you've selected an org, it's going to start limiting you to just data within that org. So for example, the project IDs available for Central are these 6 right here. So if I chose SMP, there we go. You can do intended use. You can choose a start range. This is really the meat and potatoes of Waves, is when you start getting into monitoring location. So here, if I know the exact name of the monitoring location, I can choose it here, add it over there. If I wanted to be more general and just see all the surface water, you would just choose the primary type. Surface water would normally be here already, county. Choose the secondary type. Now you don't have to choose all these, but the more options you choose, the more precise your data will be. So lake, WIBID, obviously. And then we start moving into the activity and result tab. So here I can choose that I only want to look at sample data versus field or equipment blanks. I only want to see surface water as opposed to QC or groundwater. I can choose a date range. So if I only wanted to see data from the beginning of this year until today. If I wanted to be more general and choose a group, I can choose biological. I chose these simply because I wanted to be able to get something that wouldn't take 5 minutes to load or a couple minutes. So I chose metals. But obviously lots of folks are interested in micro and nutrient and field observations. So And then once, if you wanted to get, instead of going with a group, let's say I only wanted cadmium. Oh, first one. I can choose, you would choose the unit of measure, by the way, and you can choose more than one. So if you want cadmium in all of these available units of measure, you can do that. By the way, I'm getting to cadmium because I'm just typing CA on my keyboard, and that's going to just take me to the first analytes that begin with C and A. So if I wanted to go to microcystin data, just MI will take me right there. It's all about how fast you type, by the way. Okay, so we know we want to look at the metals. We've got where we want them from and the type of the type of matrix that we want and the activity type. We can also choose a date for when the activity was loaded. So there is a difference between activity loaded. That's when the organization would put it into the database. The activity I was up top. I already went over the activity start date range. And if you don't see a filter that is fitting your needs, like you wanted to look at equipment blanks or other, you need to make sure that you're looking in these additional list filter options. So if I had a lab that I wanted to see data from, choose lab ID. Here's all the lists of the labs that we have currently loaded in Win. So, and then that'll help you narrow that down. There's some additional filters, for example, on field blank batch IDs, items like that. So once we've got all the filters we'd like, we scroll down to the bottom of the screen, and we hit Run Samples Report. And once again, we're going to choose extraction because we really want to customize this a little bit, get rid of some features, get the lab name in there. And we have two options. We can extract the report, which will just provide us with a text document, just like the last screen where I was showing you the map features were. Or if we choose extract report and save as, most of the time it would say save. I think I pulled up a ways, but the save feature says, okay, we want to do this pull. I'm doing the same pull every 3 months, and it doesn't change except for maybe 1 or 2 pieces of data. And I don't want to have to make that selection every time I want to pull the same type of data. So when you choose the save as, you're going to choose your organization. You will not see all these, by the way. Name it. Oh, look, I like Tommy's extraction. We'll call it version 2. Put a little description. This is for Seminole and gets metal. And then you save it. So once you press save, the extraction will perform because you've already asked it to do that. Everything works well for me here. And instead of once again waiting for that extraction to happen, let's just pull up the one that I've already extracted. So this is how a extraction from waves will look. And once again, it's kind of gibberish if you're not used to looking at text documents all day like me. So we want to put this to where we can manipulate it and actually have a good look at this data. So first thing you need to do is there's going to be some items, some information above the header that is really just details about what you've extracted. So it'll say, okay, this is from Central and it was metals and all that. So you typically want to remove that before you try to put it in Excel. So the way that I like to put data in Excel from here is I grab all of it and I copy it. These are all done on the keyboard. And then I open up Excel, just a blank document, and in the first cell, I just paste it. right? It almost looks nice, but it's not really. All the data is concentrated in this first column. So I need to have Excel recognize my delimiter and actually show me the data in something that's useful. So if you click on the Data tab and click Text to Columns, you're going to get the columns wizard. So this is a delimited document. It defaults to tab. Our delimiter is the pipe. So that's the backslash above enter. So if you press shift and that backslash button, you've got your pipe right there. You can see that I did it correctly because now Excel is showing me all these columns separated properly. Click next. The last suggestion, this is not required, but I absolutely recommend it, is because of what Excel does to your dates, where it will change it to a date formula that is difficult to work with outside of Excel, I grab every column just with a shift left click, and I change all these columns to text. And then when you hit finish, now I have each one of those data points in their own separate column. And if you want to get real fancy, you grab them all, double click that, and now they're even sized properly. So you just shift double click right between A and B, and it'll move all those to a nice, pretty display. Okay. Now, if you like doing it a little bit differently, you can also go into File. Once you just open a blank Excel document, if you go to File, Open, and then all my stuff is on the desktop. So you select the document and hit Open. It also will bring up the text import wizard. So after that, it's the exact same process where you're selecting you're selecting your delimiter, and you're going through and making changes to the data set. It's important to know that, once again, you need to get rid of this information at the top of the report, because until you do that, it won't recognize some of these columns properly. So it'll load, but it won't look very nice for about 5 rows or so. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about waves, extracting data, Excel? I'm pretty good at Excel. Anyone have questions about that? Okay.
Hi, this is Darlene from Swanee River Water Management District. I was is there a way to use the map tool in the advanced report to put it over in the waves? So like if I want to select stations available in a certain geographical area.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. There is absolutely, so this map is similar if you've ever used SPA, which I'll be going over later, which is our store-ed extraction feature. The map does have some interactive features on it. So if I was to, you need to show these tools, they're hidden by default. But let's say that I wanted to get the monitoring locations within this area of Plant City, but I wasn't exactly sure the WIBID, and I didn't want to go to the county level. Or I've chosen the county and I know I just want these 8 or so. You could just center to make it easier to see, expand your tools, maybe. Where are my tools? Sorry, let me move some items around here. There we go. And it is this circled eye that if you give it a second, the help text calls it select features on a map with a freehand polygon. So if you click that, you need to make sure you're starting an area because we're going to draw a circle around these monitoring locations. So you just left click and start drawing. And once you've completed your circle, just let go of the left click. Win will show you the ones that you've highlighted. And then you'll see them down here as well. And then I can, just like before, get details based on what I'm looking for. So if I want to see the sample details, it is important to note that when you use the interactive map, you're not able to drill down to specific, for example, if you just wanted nutrients or you wanted to see phosphorus and nitrogen, if it's collected at those monitoring locations, they will be part of the data set, but you can't exclude the other results that were collected. So this can absolutely help you there. In fact, you could do a monitoring location report and get the names for those monitoring locations and then use it over in waves and be able to kind of isolate the data you need a little bit more than just this blanket data. That this is really all the data that's ever been collected at those monitoring locations since they've been reporting to WIN. So just keep that in mind if you decide to use that feature. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Does anyone have any other questions about it? Okay. So I did want to touch on just briefly our minimum data quality standards that we've talked about with error checking and things like that are all on this FTP site that we work with over here in Deere. And you can see not only the minimum data quality standards, which are within this file system right here, and you can see each one of these is, we've separated them so that once you're finished with projects, you only have to look at surface water, groundwater. Each one of them has their own standards and that need to be met. And they're all in Excel documents. But this is also a great place to see what a example file looks like. So the way your data would look in, for example, in Excel. So you pull that up. This is in a default configuration that we've put. So just keep in mind that if your data is in a different order than this, that's the whole point of configurations, is to make it match your data. But this is just a good way to see the different data types, maybe some of the requirements. Maybe you're not sure about how to make an activity ID, so you can get some ideas, because that's a number that users generate, file formats, things like that. So all that's on our site and is available to everybody. And we encourage anyone that's starting, or even if you've done a little while and you're rusty, you haven't uploaded for a couple months, don't be afraid to go in here and just pull up our files and see how we've done it. We also have our StoreAt manuals. This presentation, bare bones as it can get, is also here. So if you want to see contact information for the coordinators or any sites that I've mentioned, they're right here in this presentation. Okay. So the last thing in terms of my demonstration I'm going to go over is the SPA website. So it's important to note that even though we have placed StoreAt into, which is our old database, into legacy status, it is still a data repository that we use and that I'm sure other people are going to need to use in the foreseeable future. We will not be combining the StoreAt database with the WIN database. Those two items will stay separate because our minimum data quality standards for WIN are more detailed and they're just higher than they were when the StoreAt system was developed. So if you're looking at data and you want to see a list, let's say for the last 10 years on a water body, then you would need to make sure that you're pulling your data from the SPA site and from the WIN site, because there's a very good chance that WIN will not have some of that older data. So if you do need to use the SPA site, just like WIN, if you're not sure about where it is, you just type in FDEP SPA, do a search engine. The very first thing that comes up. It also has features that look a lot like WIN and act a lot like WIN. So we still have the search by map. This map is a little bit different. It would let you type in an address, for example. So if I wanted to see Tallahassee and see a feature, well, that's great, except that all it does is center me on Tallahassee. It does not choose any of the monitoring locations within Tallahassee. So I'm presented with a lot, and I have to make sure I'm looking at this key to see what I'm looking at. You can put in station and county names. But it also has the draw feature. So let me zoom in. I know this is starting to look a little wonky. So if I wanted to get all of the monitoring locations within the north side of Lake Jackson, I still have this draw feature on the map, which is this little polygon eye here. So I can still do the draw. And just like with WIN, I've got the details of those monitoring locations I've selected. I can either get station results, which will only give me information about the station, so remember that. Or I can hit query water quality data. It says, okay, you've selected 7 items. Here's the station IDs. Pick a date range. Date ranges in SPA only go 7 years back at a time. So if I want to go to 2001, I need to go to 2007, and then I get another 10 years. So don't think that we only have 10 years of data. Click 2001, make sure you click a day. You can start to drill down. Let me go back, that was a little fast. If you select water quality characteristics, this is where you're able to start choosing biological data, metals, nutrients, things like that. So if I chose metals, for example, and I did a search, I would get all the metals within Storette. Choose silver, make sure that you add it. You can choose all of them if you like. So you want all metals, you just click all characteristics and hit add. Easy to remove too, thank goodness. And I should do gold to see if there's any gold close by. But once we've got what we want, we hit done. Now, there are 2 options when you are querying data. There's both station and water quality. So I'm going to show you both because it's going to show us the monitoring locations we've chosen. Water quality criteria would just show you the data as opposed to the locations where you grab the data from. So I would recommend to kind of save yourself some time, unless you want to see that map again that you've already selected along with a list of the monitoring locations. You will want to choose the water quality data radio on the previous screen. And there we go. So for silver, I had 3 results within the time span that I placed for silver. And then you can, just like with waves, you can download the water quality results. It comes out as a text document that you can put in Excel. So we've tried to keep a lot of these features as close to the WIN features, as close to Storette while still making improvements on them, so that if you're familiar with Storette, at least you'll have an idea on how a lot of the WIN features work. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about Storette or SPA?
Hey, Tommy, this is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Is there a limit on how much data you can get? I remember in your early slide you said if it's extremely large, it would happen overnight, or maybe that was for uploading. But is there a limit on downloading from SPA or through Wave on how much?
There is a limit for WIN. I believe you would need to get to, is it 1 million results? So we have 3 amounts. So if you're not signed in, your limit is 5,000, or if it's an on-screen report. Between that number and 500,000, you can pull it live. So that would be downloaded on that text document. Above 500,000 to 1 million would be an overnight extraction. And that would come as an email on whatever email you've registered with the system. Above that is either a weekend expansion, but not everyone may have that ability. If you start to hit those numbers and they're really important, you know you can't drill down, you would need to call your coordinator, and we would work and try to find out why you're either getting so many, or if you really need, 1.5 million results, we'll find a way to try and get them to you.
Right. Okay. Okay. Great.
Yeah, and we can always do, if you're hitting a limit, you can always do multiple polls as well. So to try and maybe split those into two. Excuse me. Storettes, I'm sure that it has a limit.
There is a limit on Storette, and this is Denise, I'm sorry. I cannot recall what it is right now, but if you hit the limit, it will tell you, and then you basically just either modify what your ask is, or you talk to your WIN coordinator, and they will help you out.
Yeah, so when in doubt, don't be afraid to shoot your coordinator an email or give them a call, as that's what we're here to do.
Do you want to tell them how they find out who the coordinator is?
Yes, at the end of the slides, by the way, I'm going to have a list of the coordinators. Some of the definitions of areas are kind of vague, so don't think that if you're worried about reaching the wrong coordinator, you won't. If you talk to a coordinator, we're going to help you, and if it's involved, we'll get the one that usually helps the area that you're based in. Okay, so that is all that I have for the demonstration. If no one has any questions beyond that, I'm just going to finish up my slides, give you an idea of, or give you some information on our contact, and just open it up for questions or in the meeting whenever you guys are ready. Okay. Sorry, give my system just a second, and we closed. Perfect. That's okay.
Browser.
Right. I like to make it exciting. Let's try that again. Dan, does that show up right on your side?
Yeah, that looks good.
Great, thank you. All right, let's click through all this. There we go. So we talked about Storette and SPA. Here, once again, if you just can't stand search engines or you like memorizing stuff, here is the WIN and the SPA location. So those are the exact addresses. So talking about what's next for WIN, every day we are working with our Office Technology and Information team to make sure WIN is as fast and as stable as possible. We also, I forgot to mention, but I want to mention that if at any point there's a feature that you are looking for in WIN, we are always open to suggestions. That doesn't mean we can always implement it, but we do want to hear it. Also, any standard values, so we do have a lot of standard value lists. So if you have a new analyte that isn't in WIN, but you know you're collecting, maybe you've got a new method that is an improvement on an older method for an analyte, please let your coordinator know. There's a button in WIN, I want to show everyone that, on where you can request a standard value. This will just take a second. Whoop. It's hard to see. Okay, so there's a translation error. This is perfect. Let's say that you have an analyte and you think it should be in WIN, but you're getting a translation error. There is a button, and you'll see this in a lot of screens. If you see this plus, can everyone see my screen, by the way? Dan, can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, sorry, it's hard to see on mine. Okay, so this button right here allows you to request a new value. And so if you click it, you would put in the value you think that should be exist in WIN, why you think it should be, and then, or if you know a method's out of date, someone shouldn't be using it, you can also use that to delete it or to request to delete. This goes to the administrator and the coordinator, and we'll review it, talk to our lab. So it may not happen right away, it may not happen, but we're always saying if you think something should be in WIN, please let us know. Okay. Don't crash on me. There we go. One other thing, we started out with support on Internet Explorer. We have moved to Chrome browser support. IE will still work, but Microsoft has told us that Internet Explorer is not going to be a long-time system, so we've tried to add another browser that's going to be around a little bit longer and get supported for a longer period of time. So we went with Chrome. I do not recommend using Firefox or any of the lesser known browsers for Win. They're not supported at this time. So if you'd like to provide data to Win, these are the steps. Please contact one of the Win coordinators. Register your organization in Win, which we will go over with you. Make sure that you're looking at the MDQS documents. If you have a lab involved, make sure that they're looking at those documents as well. We invite any contact with any entity in your group to contact the coordinator. And if we don't have an answer, we know somebody that does. And this is the contact information for your coordinators. So I am the coordinator for Central, South, and Southwest, which is the Orlando area, Tampa, down to the Everglades. And then we've got Justin Nelson, who's up in the northern area and over in Miami. And then Lena is our statewide coordinator, and that encompasses most of the FDEP groups along with a couple other ones outside of FDEP. Okay. So, any questions about our presentation today? All right. Silence is deafening. All right, well, I appreciate everyone for showing up, and I invite you to, if there are questions that you just couldn't think of today, but suddenly you think of tomorrow, please contact one of us. Talk to us about anything you want to know about Win, and we are happy to help you here, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Hey, Tommy, thanks so much. This was super helpful, and yeah, very informative. And this will be, we recorded this, so this will be available for, we'll send the link, we'll work with you, Carolyn, to get the link out, and so anyone who couldn't be on the call can take a look at it later.
Sure.
So, good. Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.